And they asked him, which is the greatest commandment? And Jesus threw in there two instead of the one. It's love of God and love of neighbor. They have to go together. There is no commandment greater than these. Us, by our very vocation, what we're called to. We're called to that love of God and love of neighbor in a unique way, according to what the Lord has indeed called us to in our life. And that is our vocation. We throw around that word a lot. But vocation is of utmost importance to realize what we have indeed been called to, and then live out our life in love of God and love of neighbor in the way that God intended each of us to. This is the start of Vocation Awareness Week in the Diocese of Manchester. So all the priests kind of want to take an opportunity to talk about vocation. I think I've talked about mine quite a bit, my vocation to the priesthood, but I think it's a good thing to reflect upon, especially as we all reflect upon our own vocations and I reflect upon mine, of indeed how love of God and how love of neighbor actually comes out of all of this. Of course, there's a shortage of priests, yes, but the vocation in God's call is truly, it's a real thing. It's a real thing, the vocation call to marriage and the vocation and the call to priesthood in the religious life. Like many of you know, I'm from Akron, Ohio. Family of 4, good Catholic family. But there were two things that my mom never wanted any of us to be. That was a priest and in the military. Because nobody could ever be happy being any of those things. So that's what she said, at least. And so that was never really in the radar screen. But I think that when we look at the priesthood nowadays, it's very foreign. And when I was a kid, it was foreign too. I mean, I'll go to Hannaford and be walking around the supermarket, and somebody will come up to me and say, "Father, I've never seen you wear real clothes before." It's like, yeah, I'm allowed to wear other clothes too besides black clothes, you know? And I just say, but I have to sleep in them all. I have to sleep in my black clothes. But priests are real people. They come from normal backgrounds. And it's good to reflect upon that because, again, it can be just so foreign. My mom's biggest concern, and I did finally tell her that I was thinking about the priesthood, she took it really, really hard. And I think families nowadays, because it is such a foreign vocation, they kind of get a little bit afraid of what does this mean? And for her, she would actually go to the church on Sunday and call me in the afternoon and say, "Mike, I just was sitting in the church bawling my eyes out and crying because I have no idea why you'd ever want to do that with your life. Please change your mind." I'm like, "Mom, I'm discerning, I'm in the seminary." But her biggest fear and her biggest worry was that it was going to kind of like brainwash me or hypnotize me and I was going to become somebody I wasn't. She thought I was going to change. And it wasn't until 5 years into the seminary formation of her really struggling with the fact that her son might become a priest. She finally called me one day and she said, "Mike, I realized through this you haven't changed at all. Your personality, your humor, everything about you is the exact same. I feel much more comfortable about you becoming a priest." And that really was a good solace and comfort for me, knowing that I finally had her support, after all those years. But I think that there are many obstacles to men that are discerning the vocation of the priesthood because, yes, once we talk about it, once we come out and say, I really feel the Lord is calling me to this, what you get most of the time is, "Are you crazy? Why would you ever want to do that?" Like, I'd even call my older brother, call him on the phone and say, "Tim, hi, how are you doing?" And he'd say, "Well, I just went to the store, I picked up a bottle of wine, I'm going to see my girlfriend, and I just feel so sorry for you because you're never going to have that in your life. Why would you do what you're doing?" And I'd just say, "Okay, Tim, well, I'll talk to you later." But still, there's a culture of vocation that I think needs to be created in parish communities, in families, realizing that the priesthood is indeed a viable vocation for life, and it can bring joy, and it can bring happiness. Again, God calls each of us in different ways. Someone calls us to marriage, to love of God and love of neighbor. Sometimes God calls people to the priesthood, and that's how they're called to serve God and how to serve neighbor. It's up to each person's individual vocation and a big discernment that goes around that. Like I said before, I never believed in God's call until I moved out to New Hampshire. I was a human resource manager at VA Systems in Nashua. And I went to church on one Sunday, and I'm sure I'd heard the same gospel a million times in my life. It was the gospel of a landowner that had 5 coins, or he had 3 servants, He gave one servant 5 coins, one servant 3 coins, and the last servant 1 coin. The one that he gave 5, the servant went out to town, got another 5, came back. The one that got 3 went out to town, got another 3, came back. The one that got 1 was too afraid to lose it, he buried it in the ground. So when the landowner came back to see what they did with their money, he applauded the ones that actually did something with the talents they were given. And then he scolded the one that buried it. He said, "How dare you? I gave you a talent to go do something with and you didn't do anything with it. But these others that used them and made more good for them." And so the homily was all, are you using your gifts and talents to serve yourself? Or are you using them to serve God? And at that moment I felt like I was the only one in the church, and I felt the priest was looking at me saying, "You're called to the priesthood." So I went home for the first time that night and I Googled priesthood and saw pictures of all these guys in black and wearing Roman collars. I really felt like I was doing something wrong. It was just weird. But from that day, it never left. And I struggled with it for a couple of years, trying to figure out what this meant for me in my life. Tried to research what priests actually did besides celebrate Mass on Sunday, because I didn't know. But God's call truly was real. And once I entered into this way of life, I realized more and more love of God and love of neighbor, what this is all about. So it is Vocation Awareness Week. I hope that we rediscover what God has called each of us to, because I give so much credit and so much awe and respect to all those who have been called to the married life and are choosing to raise their kids in the Catholic faith. I'm sure they get a lot of times too, if they come to church on Sundays regularly, I'm sure with their friends in the culture they have, people will say, "You're crazy, why do you do that?" Because we like to separate church, we like to separate God from everything else that we do. But they make that determination, that conviction to bring their families up in the way of faith. And it's such a wonderful, wonderful vocation of marriage. So we give thanks for vocation. And we also pray that we create a culture here in our parish community and in our homes, that if a young man is discerning the vocation to priesthood, that we can talk about it and not just attack or not just discount, because again, the call is very real and the need in our church is very real. The diocese has an initiative that's going to be taking place in the next couple of years, that every parish community is going to be creating a vocation committee. So that what we do, everything that we do, there's always going to be some kind of vocational aspect, where we do pray for priesthood, the religious life, vocations to the married life. But we kind of keep that at the forefront and center, because that's what this is all about. The greatest of the commandments, love of God, love of neighbor, and how God is specifically calling you and me to serve him.